We have two awesome speakers in this session. I know that because I'm one of them. My name is Adam Spencer. I'm going to chat for a little while, then get up someone who really knows what they're talking about in this space. We will then take your questions. Don't forget to use your conference app. If you haven't sent a question in on the app yet, come on, interactive sessions, conference app, pick this session, send the questions through. And also don't forget that we've got the AQ Summit and Advanced QLD hashtags going. Really exciting. I think I only typed in ADV earlier on Twitter, and already Advanced QLD, absolutely trending. So wonderful stuff. We want to see you send that stuff through. Who am I? Why am I talking here today? My background, some of you might know, as it says there, mathematician, comedian, and the like. I find it fascinating when I'm at events like this, talking to a crowd as august as yourselves on the heady topics that we discuss today. If you knew my humble beginnings, it was not always going to be that way. I was a young Aussie kid growing up. I'm expecting slides now. Thank you very much. Wonderful. That's me as a kid. Look at that. Fantastically talented athlete. Brave warrior on the field of battle. Like any Aussie, not shy for a drink now and then, which we do know can lead, can't it, to awkward social circumstances. That's me, yeah, aren't I cute? Sort of, at my dad's work Christmas party in the late 1970s. Those of you familiar with Western Sydney, we're out in Western Sydney in one of these stinking hot summer days they can only do in Western Sydney, 42 degrees or so, all sun, no shade, no hats, no sunscreen, no trees. We didn't care because we had lemonade. And off we go, running around like maniacs, and suddenly Santa turns up. Woohoo! We all get excited. I get a little bit too excited, and hence you have the little embarrassment you have there. So how is it that someone who, until the age of 5, had as their main claim to fame, hey, I was the guy who pissed on Santa, how did he find himself? A couple of years ago, the United States, at the big TED Talks. You know about the TED conferences? You know, your TED Talks, ideas that are worth spreading? I got to go to the United States a couple of years ago and talk at there. Don't take, ma'am, why are you taking a photo of that one? No, oh dear. It's available online. There's, I was at the TED Talks a couple of years ago in the United States, hanging out with people like this. Bono, lead singer of U2, yeah. There's Larry Page, one of the founders of Google. There's Matt Groening. I gave a fairly nerdy talk at TED, and I was really excited when Matt Groening came up afterwards and said he enjoyed the talk. Because those of you who watch The Simpsons in particular, you might have seen a fantastic book a couple of years ago, The Mathematical Secrets of The Simpsons. All the lead writers for The Simpsons are maths grads from Harvard and Stanford, and they just load The Simpsons with these great nerdy mathematical jokes. When Matt Groening said he liked my talk, I was quite excited. This is Bobak Fadowsi. Bobak, you might not remember, a couple of years ago when they landed the Mars Opportunity rover on the surface of Mars, and it came out of the big ship, unfolded, rolled out. Then they had to wait for the solar panels to fire up and communicate back to Earth, so there was this gap of a few minutes wanting to know if this billion-dollar project had worked or not. And it was so exciting, they broadcast it live on TV in the States. They're going through all the NASA control room. There's all these shots of the NASA control room. And the NASA control room is basically full of the sort of men and women you'd expect to see in the NASA control room. You know, fairly straighty 180s, starched collared shirts. You know, they've got the pens, they've got the pocket protector over the pens, they've got a second pocket protector over the first pocket protector in case of system failure. And then bang, there's this guy with whoosh, this rainbow mohawk sitting there. Who's he? That was Bobak Fadowsi. He was mission control chief for the landing of the Mars lunar rover. Got to meet him, and I almost got to impress Cameron Diaz. I might tell you that story later if we have enough time. Why? Because from the earliest of ages, I have absolutely loved numbers. That slide sometimes comes up a bit bigger and the numbers look even more interesting. Isn't that a great advertisement for how exciting maths can be? I love numbers. I've loved them from the earliest of ages. For me, maths has always just been beautiful. It's just been natural. I explain to my friends who don't quite get it. For me, numbers are the musical notes with which the symphony writes its universe. It is just, I absolutely love it. A great mathematician once said the universe is written in the mathematical language. And I was there at TED in the States in 2013 talking about the beauty of mathematics. Specifically, I was talking about prime numbers, right? You all remember prime numbers, yeah? 6 is not prime because 6 is 2 times 3, yeah? 7 is prime because 7 is 1 times 7, and you can't break it down any smaller than that. On the topic of small, that's quite small font, isn't it? apologies if you're up the back. We understand what a prime number is, yes? 6 is not prime, 7 is prime. We're all good, yes? Now, unfortunately, due to the time constraints we have today, I can't give you my full 18-minute TED Talk on prime numbers. I know, you're gutted, but I just can't do it today. Suffice to say, I ended up talking about this dude, okay? Look at him. What a withering stud of a man this is, yes? This is Dr. Curtis Cooper. When it comes to finding out, so I talked about prime numbers and the biggest prime numbers we know. Because we know there's an infinite number of primes, so it makes sense, doesn't it? Stay with me. This is the last bit of maths. If there's an infinite number of primes, at any given time, there must be a biggest one that we know of, yeah? So Dr. Curtis Cooper, this guy is basically the Wolverine of hunting down big prime numbers, okay? A few years ago, he had the world record. He'd discovered the largest prime that we knew. Someone else went and broke that world record. Dr. Curtis Cooper went and got that record back when he proved earlier this year, how awesome is this? The largest prime number we know is, take the number 2, raise it to the power of 74,207,211. What does that mean? Remember from high school? 2 cubed is 2 times 2 times 2, yeah? That little weird 3 that floats around the air is the number of 2s you're multiplying. We all good? Yeah? No one's freaking out? Good. Well, you just write down the number 2, 74,207,211 times. Multiply them all together. Don't forget to subtract 1, and you've got yourself a prime number. It's the largest prime number we've yet discovered. It was discovered in January of this year. It is, I apologise for these fonts coming out so small, 22,338,618 digits long. Now, pause to let that wash over you for a second, okay? I'm not saying it's about as big as the number 22 million. I'm saying if you typed it out, there are 22 million digits in it. Let's try and examine that, okay? That's the first 1,000 digits of this number. She's gorgeous, isn't she? An absolute beast. That's the first 1,000 digits. If I wanted to show you the whole number that's 22.5 million digits long, 1,000 digits per slide, I'd have to show you 22,000 screens to get through the number. So if I showed you one screen every second, it would take over 6 hours to show you that number. I'd be having the time of my life. You would want to stab me, so we're not going to do it, okay? But let's try and understand instead how big is this number. If you typed it out like a paperback novel, right? The younger people here would be familiar with the Harry Potter text series. You all know Harry Potter, don't you? You're all nerds. Harry Potter, right? The Harry Potter series, all 7 books, runs about that length, okay? If you started typing out this individual number in the same format as you type the Harry Potter books, it would run to twice the length of the entire Harry Potter series. 7,000 or so pages. And we know that number is prime as confidently as we know that the number 7 is prime. Okay? That fact fills me with an almost sexual excitement. Now, I don't know why I'm saying the word almost. That's just unbelievable, right? But as I get here, getting off on my jollies about that, I know that most of you in the audience are saying, look, Adam, we're happy that you're happy, but why should we care? Okay? A couple of reasons why that individual discovery made earlier this year is absolutely amazing. First of all, if you want to take a standard laptop computer and ask it, is this number prime or not, it would take about 2 minutes to type into a computer that individual number, 2 to the power of 7, blah, 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 and the 6 lines of code that are all that is needed to determine if that number is prime or not. It then takes that computer 6 to 8 weeks to go away and work out if we have a hit or not. So massive prime numbers are a great way to measure the speed and efficiency of potential new computer chips. If I've got the best computer chip in the world, you come along saying, I've got the new Pentium, blah, 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 let's put them in a computer and see how we go. If my computer takes 6 weeks to show that that's prime and yours does it in 4, you've got a faster, more efficient computer chip. If my computer takes 6 weeks to show its prime and yours comes back up to 3 weeks and says, no, I don't think it is, your computer chip can't handle the big time. So it's great in that and that alone. But it's more important than that. If you look back over time at the largest prime number we've known at any given time, and this asymptotic explosion in this small, nerdy, niche area of just pure mathematics, what it is just a beautiful metaphor for what is happening everywhere in the world of science and more broadly business at the moment. That number 10 years ago was inconceivable that a computer could find that number. 20 years ago, it was inconceivable that we found the number we found 10 years ago, ever. 10 years from now, you'll piss yourself laughing that we thought that was a big prime. You won't, I will. That's what's so exciting. My heroes in this world of big data are people like this. Professor Terry Speed, who won the Prime Minister's Prize for Science a couple of years ago. Terry wanted to be a medical doctor when he started at university back in the 1960s, lasted 6 months, didn't work out, went off and did a degree in statistics. Now, I'm the first to admit, back in the mid-1960s, a degree in statistics, that's fairly dry stuff, right? But Terry Speed now, 50 years on, works at the Walter Eliza Hall Institute, where he's at the forefront of big data in the medical sciences. It is statisticians like Terry Speed writing new mathematics because the maths we had 10 years ago is not good enough to deal with the quantity of data we've got today, who are walking side by side with professors in medicine in making the current breakthroughs. For example, a couple of years ago, Roche, the giant pharmaceutical company that we know of, had a project where they took 300 cancer tumours and extracted the DNA from those 300 cancer tumours. Get this. That project is going to create some data, yeah? The genetic code of 300 cancer tumours, that's data. How much data? That single experiment created more data than Roche had created as an entire company in everything it had done in the century 1910 to 2010. Pause to think about that. You're talking about a single experiment that created more data than a century's worth of data collected up until just 18 months before it. Some of you would have heard of the Square Kilometre Array being built in Western Australia and South Africa. It's a series of radio telescopes. If you bunch them all together, they'd run 1 kilometre by 1 kilometre, obviously over a lot bigger area. When it's up and running, the Square Kilometre Array's daily data traffic is going to be multiple times current worldwide internet traffic. We are building something in Western Australia and South Africa that is the size of several of the current internet, and it's essentially a single device. A friend of mine who works on it says that we are going to start looking at the universe, which until now we've looked at through a pinhole camera. We're going to start looking on an IMAX screen. And you simply won't recognise the field of radio astronomy and our understanding of the structure of the universe 10 years from now. I heard just this afternoon from a guy I met last year when he won an AMP Foundation grant about how awesome is this? You want data, how do you get your hands on it if you're not part of some big fancy institution? Open Access XYZ, Tim Squared's Library Laboratory, launching today, is giving organisations access to the world's total research output at no cost. He's in the room. Give him a round of applause, please, because, Tim, that's just absolutely unbelievable, and projects like that are going to change the world. What about the Large Hadron Collider and the discovery of the Higgs boson? Yes, now often when I talk mathematics and science in public, I'll put something out there, a bit mathsy, and then I'll say, look, if you don't understand what I've said, just put your hand up, okay? Now that can be a bit awkward in a group like this where you're here with your friends and your peers, you don't want to admit that you don't understand. So do me a favour, have a quick look at the person sitting next to you, yeah? Have a quick look at the person sitting next to you, yeah? Put your hand up if you think there's a chance they don't really understand the whole Higgs boson thing, yes? Awkward for that guy with the person both sides on the hands. That's the way it goes. You don't have to understand about the Higgs boson. Don't worry about this particle that gives other fundamental particles their mass. What's awesome about the Higgs boson is this. When Peter Higgs came up with the theory in the early 1960s, the scientific community's response was, awesome theory, Peter. Unfortunately, no point having that theory Because we will never be able to build a device to test your theory. Never in the history of mankind will we ever be... Mate, you'd have to take subatomic particles and smash them into each other at almost the speed of light. 50 years later, just 50 years, with Peter Higgs in the audience wiping away a tear, they go, mate, you're right, we found it. That's unbelievable. You heard earlier this year that we confirmed that last year we saw gravitational waves. Again, doesn't matter what they are. Waves from gigantic collision events that actually stretch the fabric of space-time itself. Ow, I've got a headache. It's awesome. What I want you to understand about gravitational waves is this. How do you detect something that stretches the fabric of space-time itself? You set up a device that shoots a laser this way, bouncing backwards and forwards over a 4-kilometre path, and another laser at right angles to it, backwards and forwards over a 4-kilometre path. Those lasers go multiple times, so they're covering something like 300 kilometres. If the fabric of space-time itself is stretched, one laser will go slightly further than the other as space-time stretches. And we found that one laser went slightly further. How much further? 2 lasers that went 300 kilometres, one of them went further by 1/1,000,000th of the width of a hydrogen atom. To use a technical term, fuck me. That's unbelievable that we have devices that can measure that in the world that we live now. Last you got to fulfill a lifelong goal of mine. I met Garry Kasparov, the great chess player, world's greatest chess player, 1980s, 1990s, unbelievable. Came to Sydney to talk at a conference about digital technology and where to now in the next age of machines. And at the end of it all, Garry agreed to play chess against a few people. He did what's called a simul, set up a string of chessboards, played chess against us. I got to sit down and play chess with Garry Kasparov. Handshake, let's go, game on. The result, not important, but... I did at one stage have to resort to a few radical tactics that maybe Garry hadn't seen before. He had me covered. We got on great, yacked, best buddies, took a copy of my book, all that sort of stuff. But what was really interesting was talking to Garry about his experiences back in the late 1990s when he played the chess computer Deep Blue from IBM. 1996, Kasparov plays Deep Blue. He beats Deep Blue. The guys from IBM take that sort of stuff very seriously. They go away and create another computer called Deeper Blue. Not the best name. Bloody good chess computer, comes back and beats Garry Kasparov. Machine had finally beaten man in the battleground of chess. Okay? What's incredible is this. Deep Blue was not a computer, but 2 computers, massive things all talking together, multi-million-dollar project, 15 full-time staff, yada, 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 yada. 15 years later in 2012, I download on this phone a chess app that would beat Deeper Blue, would beat any grandmaster in the history of chess, and it cost me $9.95. So we've gone in 15 years from the greatest computer of its type in the world to a minor app on my phone for which I got change out of $10. Right? When I try and impress people about the phenomenal computing power that you're just carrying around in your pocket these days, the coolest thing I've ever seen a mobile phone do is this. This is called CubeStormer 2. It's a Lego robot, Samsung phone hybrid. Take a Rubik's Cube, shuffle it randomly, put it in there. CubeStormer 2 can examine the cube and solve the cube in 5.3 seconds. Okay? I'd like to cut the video there because it gets a little bit raunchy. But there's a CubeStormer 3 that can do it in a couple of seconds. The video's not as good quality. That's unbelievable. A mobile phone that searches through any of the 43 million ways that you can solve a Rubik's Cube and does the optimal, fastest solution. This excites some people. It scares others who say, look, I've seen your Will Smith films. I know how this goes. You know, the robots come, they're all friendly, yeah, they help us around the house, yeah. Someone says one nasty thing to one robot, that's it, boom, they rise up, kill us all, it's the apocalypse, okay? Don't freak out. The robots aren't coming, they're already here. You've heard about Amazon and how it's done there. You've heard about robots in healthcare. We were talking earlier in our other parallel session about your electric cars. And when electric cars fuse with driverless cars, and you're going to have this awesome thing of where your car, which is normally used for maybe 5% of the time and the other 95% of the time sits idle, it's going to drive you to work, you'll hop out, it'll go off just Ubering itself around town like a little taxi cab, making money for you, come back, pick you up and take you home. It's the future of floor care. At the University of Sydney, where I'm the ambassador for maths and science, we've got this robotic going on in crop sciences. There's the AgBot 2 outside. How awesome is QUT's AgBot 2? This thing looks after itself around the paddock and below through its viewer can look and detect individual weeds, work out which ones are good weeds and which ones are bad weeds and clean the crop accordingly. Sydney Water has this amazing, beautiful Internet of Things thing going on. In the old days, when a pipe bursts, it's a nightmare. Pipes don't tell you in advance, I'm about to burst. It bursts, water everywhere, inconvenient time, rip up the road, shut off all the streets, people without water for days. They now have an Internet of Things going where different parts of the network start to tell us we're under stress. If I was you, I'd fix us now in advance, prevention rather than cure. The IP for that is being demanded by organisations around the world, smart, interactive systems. You tell some people about this, they get excited. Others just stick their fingers in the air and go, can't hear you, can't happen to me, can't happen to me. It's my 8-year-old daughter Olivia, that's what she does when I say clean the house. No, Dad, can't hear, can't hear. You can't sit there in your industry anymore and say it won't happen to us. You would have read the PwC report last year, future-proofing Australia's workforce. Up to 44% of all jobs in Australia currently held in industries that over the next 20 years could face substantial digital disruption. Not saying every one of those jobs will vanish, but up to half of all Australians at the moment work in industries that over the next 20 years could face the taxi Uber moment, the hotel Airbnb moment. But the more people we move into STEM, the faster we future-proof the economy and create growth along the way. If you ever wondered if we are truly a connected economy or not, how awesome was the Telstra dropout a couple of weeks ago? That was just the zombie apocalypse of people, wasn't it? It was an embarrassing human error that caused a massive network outage one Tuesday. Telstra, WTF, I need to work here. Get a socket set and get to work. This is ridiculously poor, not paying my bill this month. Hurry up, hurry up. This is how Skynet started, right, said someone. Someone said somewhere at Telstra HQ, there's a bottle of bad tequila sitting on a delete key. At the same time, the good people at Kogan went online and it started offering massive discounts on their product at the time. We're a connected society like never before. At an organisation I spoke with recently, the guy pointed out that clients started as B2B, then became B2B2C, but now they're C to B. Clients demanding from the business instant guaranteed connectivity, high volume, the in-flight Wi-Fi that no one had even had as an idea a few years ago have upgraded from 3.1 to 70 megabits for the carrier before the system's even gone online. Secure mobility not an option, it's the default state of play. What have I done about it? I've written a couple of books over the last couple of years to try and get kids excited in this beautiful world of mathematics and science. The Big Book of Numbers and the World of Numbers. And I'm really excited at how well they've cut through. Nerds like us don't mind them. 11, 12, 13-year-old kids have been the biggest audience for this book. That gives me some faith. Some of you might not recognise the book like that. You might have seen it more like this, in a bookstore with a signed by the author sticker on it. I'll let you in on one quick little secret. This is about growing your business. If you're in publishing or anything like that, if you ever print a book, if you ever release a book and you're walking past a bookstore, go in and offer to sign the copies of the book. You do that for 2 reasons. 1, first thing they do once you've signed copies of your book, they move your book right up the front of the shop. Big sign saying signed by the author. It's a free advertisement for everyone walking past who doesn't have time to go into the shop. 2, bookstores don't buy your book then sell it. Bookstores take an issue of the book, and if after 6 months they can't sell it, they just send it back to the publisher, unless the book has been, quote, altered or materially defaced, end quote. Guess what a signature counts as? Mate, I make $5.71 a signature. I'll sign millions of the bastards for you. I love it. The final point I want to make, I want you to think about this for a second. This is a photo taken at last year's National Girls Under-10 Chess Championships. The girl on the right is my daughter, Ellie. She's up against Jennifer the Juggernaut Zhang on the left, okay? The way the National Chess Championships work is really cute. You play your games, and who you play in the next round depends how you're going so far. If you're smashing it, you start to play the tougher players. If you're struggling, you play the weaker players. Ellie has an all right day 1. Day 2 wins 3 from 3. Game on, right? It's pretty obvious on day 3 our first game is going to be against the Juggernaut. So I say to Ellie the night before, look, this girl can play. She's good. You have to really be on your game tomorrow. Turn up, be confident. If you make a mistake, you can't let her realise that you realise you've made a mistake, okay? 2 things notice about that picture there. 1, look at this game face that Ellie's got on for the Juggernaut, hey? Look at the death stare. Isn't that fantastic? 2, if you know anything about chess, have a look at the state of the board. Ellie's made 1 move at this stage. At under 10 girls chess, it's the only opening move that anyone makes. The pawn in front of the king, just moving out 2 squares. It's the most predictable thing in the world. So Ellie's basically sat down opposite the Juggernaut, made the only move she was conceivably going to make and go, huh, what have you got? Turns out the Juggernaut had more than enough and absolutely smashed her. But the important part of the story, we were down there in Canberra, not where we live, borrowing a mate's car, going to the tournament in this lovely little fancy private school in town. I don't know how to get there. What do? I take my phone out and the phone tells me how to get there. I'm driving along, blown away by this experience. I say to her, well, it's incredible, isn't it? Just incredible. Look, the phone is just telling you, oh, whatever, Dad. Quote, that's just what your phone does, end quote. So anyone who's thinking, or anyone who tells you that the next wave of technology is not even more amazing, understand this. The technology we'll be talking about in 10 years that you'll be using, that your businesses will be using, that your customers will be using, will not be technology that blows our mind, because our minds are already blown. We're talking technology that's going to blow her mind, and she's not impressed by a phone that basically steers your car. That's where we're going, and that's why this is so exciting. To tell us more about how this applies to the world of business is a guy whose job is to get people digital in small or large businesses. He does that at Ernst & Young, where he's the head of their digital practice across Asia and the Pacific. So please give Richard Shur a big round of applause.
Who let the dogs out? I don't know. Well, thank you, Adam. And I guess someone thought it would be a good idea to follow Comic Genius with an accounting firm. So no pressure for the bean counters, eh? And a big props for the PwC report. I'll talk to you about that afterwards. But let me start by saying I want to talk to you today about 3 things. I want to talk to you about leadership in a digital world. I want to talk about capital. So get set. That's the predictable piece, I guess, from the accounting firm. And finally, I want to talk to you about differential investment. What you've heard from Adam, I couldn't agree with more. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, in the context of enterprises large and small, not just compute power, not just the size of our computational possibilities, but some of the other ways of technology that are coming to us and how they're going to impact your business. But what I want to talk to you mostly about is what that means in terms of the way you manage the business, manage your capital, and structure your vision and your leadership. Before I do that, though, I just want to take a bit of a pulse check. So a quick show of hands. How many people in the room manage a business, or I guess we've got a lot of government folks in the room too, manage a cost base in excess of $1 billion? So how many people's businesses are over $1 billion? A lot of books, yeah. $5 a pop? Okay, 1 person at the back. How many over 100 million? How many people's businesses are over $100 million? How many over $10 million? Okay, we're probably at about 3% of the room right now. We're talking annual turnover. How many under $10 million? Or just a lot of people not putting their hands up. No, there you go. So about 90% of the room, under $10 million of turnover. The reason I ask that is I want to talk to you mostly today about the way you structure for rapid growth on the balance sheet. And I'll tell you, if there's one thing, before we talk about the technology and the leadership, if there's one thing you ever read around digital and technology, if there's one video you watch, if there's ever one speaker you can go and see somewhere in the world, then go and watch Mary Meeker. So Mary Meeker is one of the world's best financial analysts, and she does a session every year on the internet, connectivity, big data, computational power. And Mary has this really great index she's created. I'm an index fan. I'm a marketplace guy. I'll tell you in a moment a bit more on my background to give this context. But Mary's index is she started tracking the world's biggest financial indexes of companies. And there's a really interesting trend. So she looks at the Standard & Poor's, which tracks the biggest 500 companies in the US, now 501 since Google split their share price, or split their shares into 2 different stock. And what she'll tell you is that as little as 20 years ago, it took 75 years to become one of the biggest companies in the world. So you had to assemble capital, normally hire tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. You had to have distribution, you had to have stores, you had to have partnerships. You needed to do all that, and 75 years later, you might be the biggest company in the world, or one of the top 500. She'll tell you that last year when she did the report, the average time to enter the top 500 was 9 years. And she'll tell you that by 2020, it will be less than 6. So the reason I ask people about the one person at the room who held up their hand for $1 billion, where are they at the back, who said their business is that big? These guys are going to eat you. These guys are going to catch up, and they're going to do it if they're clever because of the way they manage capital and the way they manage technology. Here's my reflection after having spent 15 years in the digital internet space, is it's not ever because you have the best idea. Loads of people have the same idea. There's no prize for an idea. People win because they're ruthlessly efficient with capital, and people win because they use technology to replace more expensive processes and business models. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and the secret is to structure leadership and structure your organization in such a way that you can enable the organization to be better at capital and to be better at the use of technology and more efficient around the way you use precious limited resource. So let's talk a little bit about those things. By way of background, my current role is I look after EY's digital business, and I look after much of our investment into the digital space, both in terms of venturing and in terms of the places where we make our investment. For the last couple of years before that, I was a venture capitalist, ran technology companies and sat on technology boards. And for 10 years before that, ran Google's enterprise practice in the region. So if you use Google Maps or Google Apps, or if you use Google Cloud Services, if you use computational power from Google, I'd love to tell you that it was as a result of me. There is no way they would have let me near an engineering team. So my job was to think about how we marketed that product, how we took it to market, and interacted with clients like you. So before that, I spent loads of time in government and in most of your worlds. But I think the really interesting thing I want to talk about today is the rise of these mid-sized businesses and how they're going to accelerate past traditional enterprises. So with that in mind, before we dive into a couple of thoughts, let me talk to you about this rate of technology change. So to Adam's point, I think that's probably one of the nicest articulations I've heard in a long time of helping understand why is it so important that these technologies are getting bigger and faster. Now, the first point is that more computational power solves much bigger problems. And so all of a sudden, things that you could never have dreamed of doing because the barrier to entry, remember our company joining the S&P 500 75 years ago, you needed tens of millions of dollars to buy a supercomputer. That means 95% of us in the room, all of my startups, they're out. Only the guy at the back, the guy with $1 billion turnover. He's the only guy who can afford that technology. Now it's inside Adam's pocket. Now you can buy it for $99 a month down at the Telstra store. I would say something about the network, but we don't do that at EY. The first point then is the computational power. The technology has got to the point where it's so cheap, and those of you that kind of understand the general models of Moore's law, technology just keeps getting cheaper all the time. The second thing is the waves of technology are coming at an unprecedented pace. So it's not just computational power. You can pick whichever technology wave you want to talk about. There's the Internet of Things, there's artificial intelligence, there's big data, deep insight, all sorts of new terms for data analytics. There's robotics, there's driverless cars. All of these waves of technology are landing not over a 20 or 30-year period, they're landing over a 5 to 10-year period. So the prize is for the people that can grab that technology and build an efficient capital and business model around it. The comment I get mostly from the back of the room, where we spend most of our time in our very large clients, is the challenge at the board and for the CEO is, so it's all changing. So what can I bet on? Historically, there has been some certainty for big institutions. I put in a core banking platform. I put in a CRM platform. It's a 10-year investment, if I'm lucky. If it goes well, I might recover the cost in 10 years. It might see me through 15 if I'm lucky, and then I'll start my technology refresh. So the first thing to understand is that the governance and organizational model of the big competitors is completely at threat now. That's not how technology works today. It doesn't take $10 million in 5 years to deploy mail. It doesn't take that money and that time to turn up an analytics service. You just click to get it. So give or take, of course, you still need all the normal governance and rules. So the good news is that most of the frameworks we have still make sense, but the pace at which it happens is unprecedented. So big organizations are trying to say, how do I become more agile? And here's the really interesting rub, is that because you don't need capital to get there, or because capital is coming from different places, the smaller companies can move much faster. So both players in the market need to think about adjusting the way they lead their businesses. Let me talk about a couple of just general concepts around, and then I want to talk mostly towards the end, if I've got time, around capital and the agenda of who you get your money from. Because I think that is actually the secret sauce for most of the folks in the room. And so for most of you going from 5 to 10 to 20 to 100, as you scale across Australia, the region, and globalize, it's where your money comes from and how you use it on technology to be smarter. That's the secret to high growth, fast growth businesses. But let's talk about vision. You know, I say no idea, I think, is a winning idea. I think if you look at Uber as a great example, Uber's the current cliche. So Uber is the Kodak of our day, and I think they are one of the coolest companies in the world. I think they've done an incredible job to displace a business model. Let me tell you, the app, there are tens of thousands of apps like Uber. In my old role, I ran the mapping business at Google, and I can tell you that just about every asset management company, every logistics company, every taxi company had a version of Uber. Some were better, some weren't nearly as beautiful and easy to use. The genius of Uber is if you stop and think about the capital model. Why would you buy and finance and fund cars when you can use technology to find an alternative business model? So the genius isn't in the app. You know, the example on the screen is, and there's loads of these emerging kind of e-commerce platforms now, say just make it easy for the user. So two really interesting things to start from in any kind of digital business case. Is it easy, beautiful, and fast? If it isn't, and I deliberately say that because in spite of regulation, capital, governance, structure, if it's easy, beautiful, and fast, if we've learnt nothing in the last 10 years, it will win. Prosumer always wins. But stop and think about now all of the world's biggest digital companies, the companies that are racing into the S&P 500, whether it's Airbnb, whether it's Google's already there, whether it's Facebook, whether it's very young companies who are very clever about the use of capital. So the biggest hotel chain in the world doesn't own a single piece of real estate. The biggest social network, the biggest advertising company, arguably, or at least the second biggest, doesn't have traditional agencies, doesn't have traditional distribution, doesn't own bricks and mortars to get out to customers. The secret to their success is a seamless customer experience, user experience, together with really interesting and innovative uses of capital in their business model. The turning circle is to say the next point is you have to be relentlessly focused on execution. And execution in a digital world looks really different. It doesn't look like a 5-year sprint to deploy SAP. You know, that's the world that we come from. It's very much a part of most of our large customers' world still. It will continue to be part of the world. You know, my message to the boards that I speak to is that those core enterprise platforms aren't going away anytime soon. But more and more, the stuff that sits on top of it is delivered in a totally different way. You have to be relentlessly focused on delivering in a new agile model and on delivering in these short, sharp, focused sprints. And now let's talk about customer. So the other thing you need to think about as a digital leader is to say, not only is my customer experience evolving into different channels, and I use the example of Burberry, who's one of my biggest global clients. Burberry has done a beautiful job of their online social experience. It's seamless. But Burberry's secret sauce is their store. Their secret sauce is to attract you into the experience of going into a Burberry store and buying beautiful high-end product. So they didn't throw out the old and in with the new. They're not about to deliver everything to your door with Amazon drones. They're saying, we want the store, but do you know how expensive it was in our old business model to bring people to the store? Do you know how hard it was to find you? Do you know how hard it was to find a particular type of buyer who likes that particular type of product, to reach them through broad mass market advertising and somehow filter them through all the other people to get them to buy my product? Versus now, they will track me, they will make a relationship with me, they will understand my intention in my daily internet, mobile, social usage, and they will try to find affinity with other things that I like, and they will use that to present their brand, to create an experience and encourage me to come to the store. For the sales and marketing, how many sales and marketing people in the room? This is a fundamentally different approach to sales and marketing. You know, the old sales and marketing plaster and stick, you know, above the line, this is very, very different. So it's not necessarily the strength of the brand itself, it's the combination of the brand and the relationship with the customer. Now, here's the really scary thing. How many people, when they talk about digital, get tired of talking about millennials? How many people have millennials, by the way? Who has millennials in their family? Yeah, I think my children just qualify. Yeah, and so my daughters and that generation will buy in a completely different way. And that's now being evidenced time and time again through the retail and marketing channels. The way they buy is they buy through value and through experience. So they won't buy because you got to them. They won't buy because the transaction was easy. They'll buy because they believe in you. So think about that as a brand. Think about our financial services companies. Think about the rise of peer-to-peer lending and the fact that people are looking to products because they believe in the community, the value, the mutuality, the reason for the lending, not because they believe you're the biggest or the safest. You can't guilt millennials into buying something. You can't scare them into buying something. They will buy something because it's part of something they're passionate about or because they love. And again, not out with the old and in with the new, but this is a fundamentally different type of customer, a fundamentally different type of user in the vernacular, you know, of the software companies. And this one, I think, a local Australian example. I am so delighted to come to this event. I think, you know, everybody here would congratulate the Premier, the Cabinet, everybody who's been involved in assembling this event for Queensland. In another role, I act as a technology ambassador for New Zealand. I think it is incredibly hard to take small businesses that are growing really fast and to scale them to the rest of the world. It was fascinating listening to the guys last night, some really incredible technology innovators, some incredible digital business models. But here's the trick. You can sell an app or you can transform a market. And so if you really want to scale, if you really want to think about differential investment, and we'll come back to talking about investment, if you want to think about where's the smartest place for the state, for the company, for the government to place that dollar, then think about something that changes the marketplace. An example on the screen is a really interesting one. Australia is one of the countries that's innovating fastest in a very traditional process of land settlement and land clearance. And so without going into all the details, what the banks and the government and the state government have done is they're going to make it possible to electronically settle a property title end to end, and almost all transactions will settle electronically within the next 2 years. So gone are the days of passing paper around. So it sounds easy, right? It sounds like just digitizing. It sounds like the paperless office. But now think about the consequence of every single property transaction being fully digitized and being available to the market. Think about how similar that starts to look to an equity class. Think about the liquidity that that creates in your property market in the country. Think about what bankers and financiers and other financial service providers do with liquidity and data. They build derivatives. They build other markets. They operate in ways to manage that risk. So the concept of whether or not your digital transformation will change a marketplace means you can monetize once, twice, 3 times, 4 times through the derivatives. Don't get me wrong, if you can build an app that's really good, fantastic. But if you can spend money on a marketplace that will lift and shift, the reason people get excited about marketplaces is because their multiples are quite predictable. So think about that example and compare it to the ASX. Registries, settlement houses, clearance houses, they have strong multiples of 15 to 20. Well, they did until blockchain came along. Who knows what the multiples will be after you figure out blockchain. But the point is, if you can think about a business model where you aggregate and build the market around you, the most exciting thing about these digital opportunities is normally they're new. There's normally an incumbent who's still wedded to the bricks and mortar or wedded to the distribution channel, is still shipping trucks up and down the highway. If you can build the app, you get the first million. If you can build the marketplace, you'll get the first billion. So I think in leadership, you need clarity, vision, and purpose, but you also need ambition. So always challenge yourself to say, beyond my next 100 customers or beyond my next $1 million, what's the broader market opportunity? And this is the point. I'm conscious of time, so, it looks like I'm all right. I've got 3 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about capital. With my other hat on, when I think about the startups that I'm involved in, when I think about the EY Entrepreneur of the Year, when I think about all of the amazing, incredible startups like so many of you in the room that we work with, people always come and ask me and say, what should I think about as I raise capital? First thing you should think about is getting no sleep. You know, that's the real reality, right? Is raising capital is priority 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the next 5 years. So get help. That's the first point. Get people who are really good at it. It's an art form. Pitching an idea is easy. Pitching a balance sheet needs the right skills. But the second point I would say is never, ever take stupid or dormant capital. What I mean by that is never just take money for the sake of money. Always take money from people who have other things they can add to your business. If you look at what's really clever about the Valley, is that normally the people who are putting money in the VCs have other investments or adjacent investments that grow the business. It's no coincidence that Sequoia and Google Capital and NEA, that they build portfolios around a specific area. Because what they're able to do is to manage their risk through portfolio. We've focused in on blockchain integration. We've picked the 5 best companies we think in the world, and we know at least 2 of them will be successful. You know, typically they monetize at multiples of 20 or 30 in 5 years' time. That's how we make money. So, and it's very hard in the early stages, you know, for new companies, I guess for the entrepreneurs in the room. But as soon as you can get above water, and as soon as you can get to the point of raising small institutional and institutional money, go to institutions that are aligned to your vision and can add value with other companies that they work with. For the guys at the back of the room, for the 100 million to $1 billion guys, manage that at your board. The number one conversation I'm having with boards right now is saying, do you measure your differential investment between today's business, tomorrow's business, and the future? And what I mean by that is, if you ask most boards to do an audit of what they spend on technology, firstly, they don't know where it all goes. They'll say, oh, this much is into innovation, this much is into future thinking, this much is into Horizon 3. Never the case. Generally, when you do those audits, you find that people are spending over 95% of their innovation budget on the current business. They're digitizing today's business model. And if you believe half of what we're talking about, the business model is the secret to accelerated growth. So we tell boards to make sure that you're relentless about measuring the difference. You know, the Valley talks very, very clearly about saying to shareholders, we put this much money into the current business, this much money into adjacent businesses, so think Alphabet at Google, and this much money into the future that we don't know about, and think Elon Musk. You know, here's a guy who could just rule the autonomous vehicle industry, and he's busy building trips to Mars. But his shareholders love that. They love that he has an innovation agenda, and more so, they love that he has innovation governance. Here are the things that Tesla makes money today. Here's the investment into technologies tomorrow that will change the whole industry. Here's how we get to Mars. So I think it's really important that you think about investment as smart capital, and you think about it in that differentiated way. And I think there were a few more thoughts, but that's probably more than enough. So
great stuff. Give Richard a big round of applause. Wonderful stuff, Richard. Good. Okay. If you're up the back, there's some seats down the front. Come and grab a front row seat. If you've got room for about 10 minutes of questions, send them through on the app. Richard and I have agreed to do the Q&A walking because we're vibrant, energetic guys, and I haven't got my steps up yet on my Fitbit, so I've got to get them for the day. You said that the people who make things work, they're ruthlessly efficient with money, and they use technology to evolve and replace things. Let's take both parts of that. Questions on that. First of all, with the technology to replace, someone said, what are the best cost-benefit models when you're deciding, do we replace legacy technology with fast, new, agile cloud? That's a question a lot of people are asking. How do you make that decision and get it right?
So hands up the people in the room with less than $5 million turnover. Okay. When you make your technology business case, build the business case on what it will be like when you're a $50 million turnover business. And the reason is because when you normally do the return on investment, you think about technology, let's take really simple examples. Let's say we're going to move to Amazon Web Services, an audit client of ours. So we'll say, you could also move to Google Web Services, who are also an audit client of ours. When you make that decision, at first blush, to go from $1 million to $1.5 million in turnover, there's a change cost, it's difficult, you've got to get new expertise, you've got to find the right people. That business case may or may not stack up. But I'll tell you, when you try and go from 10 million to 20 million, it's a nightmare if you have to rip out and replace all the legacy in your startup. So start with the end in mind and build the business case both ways and take that to the board and to your investors.
The other half of that, people who are ruthlessly efficient with you, you said they'd never let you near an engineering project. Just say I've got two people here who are awesome engineers. They've got the engineering and the technology down pat. They don't have that ruthless efficiency with money, and they're not yet at the point where they can go and say to someone, you're efficient with money, give us $1 million, let's party. How at that crucial early stage do you incorporate that philosophy, or is it not that important really early on?
How many of the entrepreneurs count themselves as the kind of the technology leader, the CTO? Put your hands up, be proud.
Don't be shy, geeks.
Yeah. I'm so jealous. I can't spell technology, let alone do what you guys do. You guys need to be really comfortable to not be the CEO all the time. That's the number one rule for early stage, right? Is go find someone you really trust. Don't go find necessarily the person who looks like the best CEO. Find someone you trust. Find someone you worked with, find someone you did business with, find a board member, a CFO, someone who's been a CEO before, and let them do what they do well, which is run the balance sheet and operations. You guys are the secret sauce of the company. So spend all your time thinking about the technology proposition. The world's best technology companies, the technologists, that's what they do. Now, over time, people grow and organizations grow, and you'll inevitably come back into that role of CEO, but don't be in a hurry.
Someone asked, you said the app will give you the first 1 million customers, disrupting the market will give you the first 1 billion. Around the same time as someone asked, is it worth investing in an idea that has a potential market of less than 1 billion people?
It depends what you're investing for, right? I mean, returns are all relative, so absolutely is the answer. You know, there are however many we saw here, 250 maybe, amazing sub-$10 million businesses. Not all of you, unfortunately, will become billion-dollar businesses, but probably half of you will become great businesses. You'll be profitable, you'll demonstrate shareholder value, you'll make a return for everyone who invests in you, and that will be a wonderful experience, and it will be a great investment for the people that invest in you. But just like portfolio management for the way that a big business runs, that's exactly how you should think about investment. Invest some money in the stuff which is smaller and safer, invest some money in the stuff which is kind of going to be game-changing or move the world.
It's interesting, I saw you interviewed online and you said that, to be honest, with a lot of the larger clients you're dealing with, it's not that they're now leaping through the next wave and the wave beyond. They're still actually coming to terms with digitising what they currently do and their current system. You don't need to name names, but give us examples of, because I think people sometimes assume that in certain industries, every company must be right on the cutting edge, really pushing it forward. Where are larger organisations at, and what does that mean for smaller organisations that want to work with larger ones?
Yeah, I think, a couple of interesting examples, and there's a great one up here for Sydney Water. I know we're in Queensland, so maybe that wasn't, the right politics to put up Sydney Water, but a great example...
It's a state of origin thing, not a reference you give, but trust me, very funny.
A great example in utilities, the Internet of Things. Right now, there is a race going on all around the world to build the operating system and the platform for the Internet of Things. So we're not quite sure who will win. Might be GE, might be Siemens, might be Google, might be Amazon, might be someone else. But people are investing billions of dollars into building artificial intelligence, large compute, the way to operate and control drones, sensors, and remote devices. So personally, I would not invest from Australia and New Zealand into that part of the market. But there are really interesting adjacencies, specialized use cases. So when an insurance company wants to fly a drone to inspect a house, there's a business process workflow. There's an integration into the insurance claim platform. I met a company last week in the States that does this, really niche, really focused, brilliant business model. Now, they have convinced their investors that the Internet of Things is happening and that someone's going to win. So that's the risk. They believe in that platform. They believe in that disruption. They've now picked a niche and built something which is really focused. So really similar examples, probably more mature in the last 5 years. These are different cycles these days. But in fintech, if you look at fintech started off with people trying to build the whole front to back. I'm going to build a new bank on an app. Incredibly, the banks had thought about that. What people are now doing is they're building really specific workflows and applications. So they're saying, I'm going to really hone in on peer-to-peer lending. I'm going to hone in on a great startup I met in Europe a couple of weeks back. Peer-to-peer lending based on academic transcript risk to decide whether or not I think a student is a better risk than from one school than from another, one university from another. That's the kind of, focused adjacency that you have around. As that company scales and grows, they'll get much bigger and much broader. but they've started with a really nice kind of focused adjacency.
Tony wants to ask about, did you have success in moving EY to Google Apps? Explain the change management process.
I didn't, actually, but I can tell you that it's an interesting example of where large organizations struggle in terms of, their shift from current to new. It's also a really interesting example in differential investment. So, of all the things that a large firm like EY or PwC or Microsoft could invest in, is that the place where you get the biggest bang for buck in your digital transformation? So, without talking about our firm, but if you talk about our sector, if you said to me, what's the single most impactful thing that the accounting firms can do right now to think about disruptive technology, I would say it's to think about the rise of online accounting and blockchain. Because that fundamentally will change our industry. So at the board, when I sit down and say, what are the things that we should focus on, that's the thing that keeps me awake at night in terms of what will change in our industry. Now, the good news is it probably won't change overnight. So the cycles are, getting faster and faster. And the good news is that there are things that we do that add real value. So I'm not going to tell you the EY strategy, but there's things that we think that we can do despite the fact that technology changes. But that's where we tend to think and focus. I think, in general, if I wear my old hat, one of the biggest challenges for large organizations is just embracing the cultural change. And so I think, we're working incredibly hard to do that, to roll out new technology every day in the firm. The good news for you guys in the room is it's far easier to do that with 10, 20, 100 people than it is to do it with 150,000, 200,000 people.
Fantastic. Okay, great stuff. Look, thank you very much, Richard. We've got one final question. Someone's just asked, Adam, how did you most impress Cameron Diaz? I'll tell you that in wrapping up. It's a true story. So I'm doing my TED talk in the States, right? And TED is mayhem. There's like 2,500 people. They've paid $7,500 each to go to this 4-day TED Talk festival, right? And they've drunk the Kool-Aid. They are so into it. So I had a badge that said speaker. And that, I was just royalty as far as they were concerned. Everyone just wants to come up and talk to you and all this sort of stuff. And there's this celebrity coterie that hang around TED. So Ben Affleck spoke at our TED Talk like 2 days after he'd won the Best Academy Award. Argo, US Vice President Al Gore was there. Paul Simon from Simon & Garfunkel. I'm there on the morning of one of the days and I look across and I see Cameron Diaz. And I bounce on over, Cameron Diaz, Adam Spencer, mathematician from Australia, talking on Wednesday morning just before lunch. Hope you can come to my talk. What's it about? Prime numbers. Sounds really interesting. I'd love to see you talk. Okay, I've spoken to Cameron Diaz. Off I go. I do my talk on the Wednesday morning, and without being immodest, it goes really well. It's what they wanted to hear, nerdy, everyone's excited, bang, and it's the last talk before lunch. So I'm out there in the foyer, surrounded by all these people going, well done, that's great stuff. Man, good on you. I'm talking to US former Vice President Al Gore. He's saying, son, I love that talk. I never thought I'd think a subject like that could be so interesting. That was great. Thank you so much, Al. I look across and I see Cameron Diaz. So I brush former Vice President Al Gore and walk on over. Cameron, Adam Spencer, mathematics talk, what did you think? And she looks at me and she said, I'm really sorry. Traffic was a bitch. We only just got here. I didn't see you talk. Okay, no trouble. It's fine. So, from my wife's point of view over here, who I was talking to with Al Gore, my wife sees me go, I walk back, my wife goes, what's the matter? Cameron Diaz missed the talk. Oh, it doesn't matter, the talk went really... Yeah, but Cameron Diaz missed the talk. Yeah, but the talk was fantastic. Yeah, but Cameron Diaz missed the talk. Yeah, well, Al Gore really I don't give a fuck what Al Gore thought about the talk. Cameron Diaz missed my talk. And I said to my wife, I think it's pretty obvious what would be happening right now between Cameron Diaz and I if she had seen my maths talk. My wife looked at me and said, Adam, if you had sex with Cameron Diaz, I would be the first person to buy you a beer. There you go. Give Richard a big round of applause. That was wonderful, mate.